Hi, and welcome to Creator Fundamentals. My name is Dan Courier, and I am here to help you deliver your value with online video. In this live stream tonight, I'm going to actually do a tutorial on how to create professional thumbnails in software called GIMP. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with GIMP, it is a completely free software that you can download free of charge. There's no subscription or anything like that. It's similar to Photoshop, but as I mentioned, it is free. So I wanted to give you guys an example of the type of software that's out there that you can use absolutely free to improve your thumbnail game, and hopefully some of you may be interested in actually starting to use this and trying to work on continually improving your thumbnails. So we're going to cover that. I'm going to show you a couple things. Also, a link in the description below. I actually have put together a simple template that gives you the actual size, layout, and canvas that you're going to be working on, as well as some organizational things and some backgrounds to use that you can actually download through the link in the description. Pretty decent crowd tonight. Basically, what I'm going to show you guys is this software called GIMP. It's actually the software that I use for my thumbnails. So whether you like my thumbnails or hate my thumbnails, I'm simply going to show you my process and how it all works. Plus, I'm going to give you a template if you guys want to get that as well, just to help you with organization and to actually give you the canvas size that you need to work with to kind of help you organize there. So thank you so much to Chris Conkle Vlogs for the $5 super chat. I appreciate it. He reminds everybody to hit that like button and share the video out. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. All right, everybody. So this is actually the GIMP software. This is how I actually make my thumbnails. It is available to download for free. It's as easy as doing a Google search for GIMP to download that software. I'll also throw a link if Doug or one of the moderators wants to do a quick Google search and grab the URL to download GIMP. You can throw it in the chat as well. But this is basically my process. This is how I actually make my thumbnails. And just to give you a general understanding of how this works, you're basically putting a picture together in layers. As you can see here, when we take all this stuff away, you have a template here, which is just a blank background, and then you start to build your individual pieces in layers. And that is, it allows you to do a bunch of different things that we're going to get into some of those actual features here today. So one of the things that you can do with those layers is you can create groups of layers. So that's what we're actually looking at here on the right hand side. I've just kind of organized the different groups that I use, aka backgrounds. As you can see, if the little eyeball here shows you what's visible and what's not, so I can take away the bricks or put them back. If I want to do, instead of the blue background, I can have a black background, take that away. All kinds of options, and then you can kind of create the look that you're looking for. And again, you can just, as simple as creating a new group here and then creating individual layers within it. So basically, this is how I'm organized for my thumbnails. One of the things that is the most commonly asked question about thumbnails is how to do the actual cutout of your headshot. So if I open up here where it says me, make sure I don't resize that over my face, you'll see that I have a bunch of different cutouts in here. And I can, depending on which one I want to do, I can actually come in here and just bring them into the thumbnail template. So depending on what type of video I am, if I have a face that I can reuse, sometimes I'll reuse it, sometimes I won't. And then I'll just create a new one. But I wanted to show you guys exactly how you create these as well, because they're a really big component. And you know that I've mentioned time and time again that if you are somebody who appears in your video, YouTube has come right out and said that, having a headshot with eye contact in it is very powerful in winning that click and getting people to actually stop on your thumbnail and see what you have to offer. So I wanted to go into that and show you guys exactly how that worked. To bring up an example, this is a photo of me that was in a recent thumbnail. As you can see, it's just a plain old image, but we want to get rid of this background. And the way that you can actually do it in this software is there's this little tool over here that looks like a lasso. And it can be a little bit of a meticulous process, but if you're nice and patient, I'm going to show you how to make it really easy. Because one of the things that I see when people attempt to do the cutouts is a lot of times they don't quite get all of the background out of the picture, and it can look kind of just look kind of messy and blocky and choppy. And I want to show you guys how you actually make that look nice and smooth, and you can't tell that there used to be a background there. So as you can see, when you start to do this and you follow something, you basically can enclose a certain area. But what we want to do is actually get rid of the background. So the way I usually do this, if I have a picture like this, I'm actually going to, let's see if I can do this without, I'll actually zoom in to my starting area, and I'll go down. Usually I start down here just by habit. And to zoom in on the shortcut, and I don't know what the shortcut is off the top of my head on Mac, but this is on PC. You just hold the control button down and you can use your scroll mouse to zoom in. But it makes it a lot easier to do your cutout. And basically all you're going to do is you get a starting point like this, and you just work your way along the edge. Now I'm going to do this one kind of quick just to show you guys, because I don't want to have you watching me do the entire thing, but or doing it for an hour. But this is basically the approach you take, and when you zoom in, it makes it a lot easier to not have those little pieces of it that actually little chunks of the background that show up in your picture. And try to stay as close to the edge as possible. In the event that you have to kind of cheat a little, I would cheat towards the inside of what you want to keep. In this case, we're keeping me. And we just kind of follow this around. And the good thing about this, as long as you don't click anywhere, you can actually, while you're doing this, get off the screen and move around. And you can also use your scrolling wheel on your mouse to move around. So it's a good way to kind of navigate through the picture. And then we basically continue this process all the way around, and I'll show you when we get done with this exactly what you if you don't do this perfect, how you can kind of clean it up. Because it's not always perfect. Sometimes if you have a dark background, you tend to get some dark spots, or sometimes the color from the background can bleed either into the material that you're cutting around, or you just didn't quite get it all cut out. But I'll show you exactly how this works. See, this is when you zoom in on my black hat, you can tell that I own 3 dogs and 2 cats. Or 3 dogs and 1 cat. The little remains of pet hair on there. All right, so let's do this here. And you basically work your way all the way around just like this. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more comfortable you get with being able to chop it out. And I'll also show you how to know whether you've done a good job, because when you have this with a blank background behind it, sometimes it's difficult to really tell how good of a job you did. But I'll show you a neat little, or a quick little trick. I don't know how neat it is, but it gets the job done, of how you can make sure that you've done a pretty decent job of doing your cutout. And obviously you want to avoid abrupt or harsh angles when you're doing this. And by zooming in the way we've done here, because you're working in such a small area that looks bigger, you tend to have less harsh looking lines because you're so zoomed in. So, and sometimes when we start to get to the end here, we can kind of zoom out and see where we're at. We're just about there. This part tends not to be all that important because it usually gets cropped out of the bottom. But then after you've done that, you come all the way over to the beginning, and when you get back to the beginning, you get that little yellow dot and you click on it and it creates the new selection. So if we hold the control in and we scroll out, we'll see that we have this highlight around just me. And what you can actually do is go into Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste as new image. And you can see what it does here is it takes just that inside without any of the background. Now, a couple different ways to do this. If you're in the middle of doing an actual thumbnail, you can actually kind of resize this. I'll show you here. If you resize this, and then you bring up the other window that you're working in with your actual thumbnail design, you'll see when you click on a given window like this, you'll see that it brings up the layers associated with it. So if you have both of these workspaces open and you click on this one, it'll show you the layers for that one. You can actually click on this layer and drag it over. And then it's, you know, a nice high resolution picture. So then you just go into layer and you go down to scale layer. We'll say, call it 50%. That's probably, we can probably go a little bit smaller than that. We'll do scale, I don't know, we'll go 70. Oops, what happened there? So in that case, I accidentally scaled the image instead of the layer, which all you have to do is hit undo if that happens to you. So again, we wanted to make sure we're on the layer, scale the layer, go down to 70, and you can see I can resize that. Now over here on the left in the tools, you got this little four corners looking cross here. That's the actual move tool. So when you have your layer selected over here, you can actually go here and put this anywhere you want. And then you have that nice cutout. Now, that's how you can move it in there. If you want to save it and then bring it in individually, we can do that as well. I'm actually going to, we'll leave that there, but we'll make it invisible. And now I want to go back to this original one. So what I was talking about, when you do, after you do these cutouts, you kind of want to see how good of a job you did. So if you right click in here and you do a new layer, I would create a white layer. And I would also go in and, I don't know why it called it a green layer, but whatever it wants to do. That's probably because I was working on that free template that I created for you guys. We'll just do white BG for white background. And then actually I'll grab this one that says green, and we'll switch this to black, and then we'll click the fill color and fill that in. So what you can actually do, we'll call this black BG. You can actually, these layers, the order in which they appear in the layers section is actually how they're stacked. So if you want one of these behind your image, you drag it down there, and we want to hide the white one. So this will show us what our cutout looks like on a black background. And then we can undo that, and we can actually put our white one back there and click on the little eyeball to see it and see how good of a job we did. Now, if you see here, for one, I did this really quick, so it's kind of choppy, but you get the general idea of how it's done. But what you can do to clean it up here, and this is what I want to show you, because this is kind of what sets your thumbnails apart from others who haven't quite mastered how to clean these up. Hit Control and scroll into some of these rough areas. And then what we're going to do here is we are going to grab our erase tool. And then in our little toolbox, it shows you want to get this this little blurred edge brush here, one of these two. So it's kind of a feathered look. And then you can kind of get a sense here of how big it is in comparison to what you're looking at. So we'll bring this down in size. But basically what you can do once you have that is you can kind of click on that. You want to make sure you're on the right layer. And then you're basically going to use it to erase and kind of smooth out your edges. So you can actually kind of do this and kind of get all the dark spots that show up. And again, this may seem like a lot of labor in the beginning, but the more you do it, you get a lot faster at it. So you have this little black edge here. And then we kind of can drag in and kind of clean that up. And you basically just go around and look for the spots that you missed. Now, if you do this more, you spend more time on your cutout, there's a lot less of this to do. But it is something that you can definitely come back in after the fact and kind of smooth out. And then once you get, farther out, you're not going to see all the little imperfections. All right. So I just want to jump in the chat, see how everybody's doing, see if this makes sense or if you guys have any questions. And then we'll toggle back over here and look at some other stuff here. So, all right. So scrolling back in here. Oh, thank you so much, Dignity, for the super chat. I appreciate that. And again, GIMP is completely free. It's just what I got into previously, and I found that it can kind of get the job done, and it does a lot of the types of things that Photoshop does. Does GIMP have an app? GIMP does not have a mobile app. This is a desktop program. So you would actually go to the website that Doug shared, and you would download it to your Mac or your PC and use it that way. There are other ways to do cutouts. This is the method that I use that I found to be most consistent. And I know I can always tweak it to get a good look. And again, there's a link to download GIMP, and if you want a template that you can kind of start in, there's a link in the description. Now that we covered the actual how you do that cutout, I'm just going to show you a little bit more how you actually integrate the different pieces into the thumbnail. So let's take a look at that. So I have my layers that I've set up. These are my backgrounds that I use. I'm going to get rid of that guy. All right, so if I was going to do a thumbnail, usually the first thing I do is figure out which actual headshot I want to use, which one I think, kind of is relevant to what it is I'm working on. I'll either create a new one like we just did and do the cutout, or I will pick one that I've already used. My color schemes I try to keep them consistent. So I'll usually we start with text. And the text that I have found that's actually free to download, it's called Babis New. Yeah, this guy right here. It's actually a font that's free to download. So if you don't have it, you can go out and get it and it's reusable. And it is a really good font for doing this type of stuff because it's a nice bold font. It's well spaced. It's sans serif, so it doesn't have the little feet on it like Times New Roman, and it's just a nice blocky, chunky font that you can use. For the thumbnail that I actually did for this live stream, I actually experimented with a more commonly used, more commonly available font just to see if there was one that kind of worked like this, and it's actually, I think the one that I used for the actual thumbnail of this live stream was Arial condensed, and then I set it to bold, so it had good spacing. It wasn't perfect. It's not as good as this one, but it was something that might be an option. So basically the way I would do this, and I need to get that out of my layer there. We'll minimize, or we'll get that. We'll throw this in between these here. And then when I start doing text, I can do a new layer group, and we will just call this text. And then I'll put my text in it just for organization's sake. And I have a common way that I do these. So normally what I'll do is I get my first text is in white. I'll hop down in the layer below that. I'll do new layer, transparency, and that's going to create this blank layer, and I'm going to put that in the same area with my text. Make sure it's inside this box so it hides with that. And when I have it highlighted, I'm actually going to use this square tool, highlight an area that's a little bit bigger than my font, change my front color there to the red that I always use, and then we can go in here and go to edit, fill with foreground color, and you'll see it fills in that block. So that gives a nice contrast for that. And then I kind of want to make the text pop out a little bit more. So if you go into the text and you right click and you go add to alpha selection, it'll just select the text. Now, when you're, in this case, I'm trying to do a drop shadow, and by default text has its own little box here that I don't want to get in the way. So what I'll normally do is when I'm done writing the text, I'll actually right click on the text and set it to image size, set layer to image size, which will basically take away its text properties, but it also takes away that box, so I'm not going to have anything that kind of creeps out beyond it. But you'll see that when we do this and add to alpha selection, it outlines all the text, and then I use a filter of a light and shadow drop shadow, and then I can set a nice drop shadow, black in color, to make that text kind of pop off of that that red box. And then we do this, and you'll see it throws that layer behind it. If you hit Control A, it'll select all and get off of that, and you can see it kind of now looks like it's raised text. Now, one of the things you can do when you're trying to kind of organize these, sometimes vertical or horizontal text like this isn't quite as eye-catching as something that may be a little bit angled. So what we can actually do here is we can grab on to the actual, well, first what we're going to do is we're going to lock all these in place. We're going to select the actual group that it's in, and we're going to go to Layer, Transform, and Rotate. And then you'll see this grid, and if you click on it, you'll see we can move that whole box. Give it a little bit of an angle, make it a little more interesting, and click Rotate. That'll rotate it like that, which looks good. And then we want to get off of that. And then we're going to do the next element, which for me is usually yellow text. Now, once you've created text, this gets a little weird sometimes, where it wants to, if it thinks you're clicking on a text box, it'll say create new layer, and it basically reproduces the one you had, which is all right. Not a big deal, because then we'll just pull it down here. And so what I just did is a little trick. Like if you want to maintain the formatting of text, if you come in this text and you backspace to the beginning of it, when you're typing, sometimes if you try to type in the beginning, it'll lose the actual formatting. So as you can see, I typed an A in front of that, but now it's teeny tiny and back to the default text. So what I usually do is I'll come in here and I'll type out in front of the first letter and then get rid of it, just so it doesn't do that. It's kind of a little quirky thing that it does. But then we want to change this to my branding yellow. We can you know, make that a little more dramatic here. And then we can actually do the same thing. Take that text, add to image size, and then that's going to make it the whole side. Then we go to transform and then arbitrary rotation. And this is good because we have the whole box. So now you can look at the crosshairs and compare them to the lines on this red box. And you can actually line it up exactly with that, so it ends up with the same exact angle. So you kind of tweak that the way you want it and hit again, or hit that, and then you'll get this. If you get this floating selection here, just go down here and anchor layer, and that'll put it, you know, get the whole thing there. And then you can kind of put this up here. You can see that that box where you've resized the whole image to the size will shift when you move this. If it bothers you, you can just right click on it again and add layer to image size. And then we want to make that pop a little bit, so maybe we'll throw a shadow behind it as well. So again, add to alpha selection, filters, lights and shadows, drop shadow, and bam, just give it a little bit of a touch. And since we're kind of on a blue background, you can actually we'll throw a couple back there just to kind of darken it up again. Control A, and then you have that. Now remember, for those of you who have watched previous videos on the subject or heard any of the channel reviews, you always want to keep stuff out of the lower right hand corner, because you're looking at on mobile, you're probably looking at something around this size that's the timestamp, and you don't want to put anything down there that's going to be obscured by the timestamp. The timestamp's always going to show up there. It's a little bit smaller. It's probably somewhere down here on desktop versions, but it's something to keep in mind. You want to try to keep that area clear. And then when you actually are done with this, you want to actually export it. Now, if you're doing these, typically when you're doing these layers and things, you're dealing with PNGs, but when you export, if you just try to save it, it's going to save it in the GIMP format, which is, I think it's XCF. Yeah, XCF, but you want to actually export this in like a JPEG format. You can export in a PNG as well, but sometimes they get too big and YouTube won't accept them. So you just come down here and go export as, and then you can pick a name. You know, give it the name that you want, and then change the extension to JPEG and click export, and it'll show you some options here. You can set it to whatever quality you want. You can set it to 100, that's fine. and then export. It's going to save that, and then that is the actual file that you're going to upload on YouTube as your custom thumbnail. All right, guys, that's all we have for tonight. Thank you so much for joining. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, definitely consider clicking that subscribe button and the bell notification icon if you want to deliver your value through online video. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you coming back every week and hanging out on Wednesday nights. And if you're new, welcome. Join the community. It's great to have you. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.